You're listening to your internet bestie.
Hey dudes, I'm Kat, your internet bestie, and welcome to episode 2 of the only podcast which is truly out of this world. Whether you're a frequent flyer of the alien gang or have just crash landed here by some cosmic accident, you are in the right place. This is your cozy spaceship where we talk all things mental health, recovery, being neurodivergent, and just those big feelings that can sometimes make us feel like we are aliens. Welcome aboard. To those of you just listening, allow me to set the scene. I am, as always, surrounded by posters, plushies, and mood lighting, but today I am sporting some jump scare makeup, I have to say. It's green eyeshadow with some semi-green lips. It looks like I've just crawled out of a swamp. Shrek who? Shrek has been mentioned, my dudes. Kat, stay focused. We have a lot to talk about today, my dudes. We're gonna jump straight into chat with Kat. Ooh, as promised, I'll be telling you my entire mental health journey from where it all started to where I am now to help you guys get a better understanding of who I am as a person and why I find it so important to advocate for mental health, especially in young people. Before we begin, I do just want to give some trigger warnings because whilst there'll be no mentions of numbers or any graphic details, if you are currently in a vulnerable position and don't want to hear about things like trauma or eating disorders or self-harm, this might not be the episode for you. That is okay. Click away and I will see you in the future, I am certain, my dudes. But to those of you staying, let's jump into the prologue, which I call Rocks. Now, yes, this might sound absolutely diabolical, but I promise it is important to the story. Stay with me here, my dudes. Basically, around the age of 6, 7, 8 years old, I collected a lot of rocks, and I don't just mean the odd rock here and there. I mean finding a rock in the playground and feeling so emotionally attached to this rock that I'd have to take home not only that rock, but every single rock within a 10 centimeter radius. That is a lot of rocks, my dude, so naturally I would come home with pockets filled to the brim with rocks, and my parents, they would not be too happy. And so I ended up spending my early primary school years hiding in the bathrooms because I was so afraid to come home with pockets full of rocks. But of course this was really, really bad for my social life, if you can call it that, at the age of 7, because I couldn't really play with my friends. You know, they were playing in the playground and running around having fun, but I couldn't do that because I was so afraid that I would go and I'd have to collect rocks. Yeah, that's that. Something similar to that story is my violin era. Here's a fun fact about Kat for you, my dudes. I used to play the violin. I genuinely loved the instrument. I played for quite a long time as well. I would love in the future to pick it up again, but anyway, back to the story. I struggled quite badly with contamination OCD, and when I first started violin, I had my own violins. I had a quarter-size violin, a half-size violin, but as I got taller, my arms got longer, I needed a full-size violin. But my parents were like, you know, this is quite expensive, so let's just rent the violin, so that's what we did. But this ended up not being very good for my budding musical career, which I definitely had, my dudes. Oh yes, I was the next Mozart in the making, my dudes. Oh, it's those German genes. Is Mozart German? Yeah, he's German. He gives German energy. Beethoven. Oh, I'm probably going to underscore this podcast with Beethoven, as I usually do. Thanks, my dude, for creating copyright-free music. Ooh! I'm so off track. Kat, get back into the program. So basically, after we started renting this violin, I just could not practice because if I wanted to practice, I'd have to sanitize my entire body and wear completely fresh clothes, and I would not be able to touch anything else because I had this thing that if I were to touch my guinea pigs or anything with a dash of guinea pig DNA on it and that were to touch the violin, then my safe space would be contaminated by something that wasn't in my direct safe space. Does that make sense? It absolutely does not make any sense. But I just thought it would be important to mention it because it kind of shows how from an early age my OCD was starting to negatively impact my life. And, you know, despite this, I was still able to do my acting, my gymnastics, my dance, and I was doing that very frequently at quite a high level. So it didn't really impact that too much, but just in other areas of my life, it was starting to kind of creep in negative ways. But yeah, let's move on to chapter 1, which is primary school. So in year 2, I moved to this up-and-coming brand new primary school, which was advertised as this school for highly academic students, which, girl, we're literally 7 years old. What do you mean highly academic? Well, supposedly I was academically gifted as a kid. You know, my parents both have PhDs and I grew up trilingual, and I was quite good with creative writing and things like that. I'm holding this mini microphone like I'm a aristocrat in the UK holding a cup of tea. What is going on with this, my dudes? Ooh. If you're watching, you can currently see my terrible rainbow nails. I did them myself with really cheap nail polish, and they're very crusty, but it's okay. It's the thought that counts. Okay, let's keep with the podcast spirit, shall we, my dudes? So, I always found a lot of validation in academic praise and success and achievement, things like that. So, I worked really, really hard at school. But I found that I had to work a lot harder than a lot of other kids to do the same amount of work. I remember so vividly this one task where we had to write an essay about the Galapagos Islands. It took everyone else 3 days and it took me 2 weeks because I was such a perfectionist that I could not make a single spelling mistake. And if I did make a mistake, I'd have to start all over. And the layout had to be perfect, the photographs that I chose had to be perfect, and in the end, I got so much praise for my work, and it was used as an example for other people. It was shown to visitors who came to the school, to Ofsted, and, you know, I was like, oh, I did the right thing. But at the same time, every single day I'd go home and be like, oh my gosh, this needs to be the perfect thing. And I'd come back to school and just work frantically at this Galapagos Islands essay. At the age of 9, I was so stressed about pleasing other people that it was kind of, you know, messing with my head, which is, you know, obviously not great in the grand scheme of things. But basically, I became the face of this new school. And I'm not going to try and sugarcoat this because it's true. Like, on the official website, it was me in the promotional video. I had like a bunch of lines to say. I still remember, when do I release my imagination? 3, 2, 1. And I had to throw this little paper airplane. It was the most cringe thing of my life. And in like promotional emails that would get sent out to like the new developmental area, my face would be on it. And this, you know, it was really cool because acting was my dream and I was really like excited about these opportunities, but people would call me like a teacher's pet and they'd get like upset that I got all these opportunities. So I was kind of this, you know, outcast from a very young age. And it became this like internal dilemma of who do I want to please? Is it the teachers? Is it my parents? Is it my friends? Do I want to fit in? And so I just never really knew what to do with myself. I always kind of felt slightly out of place. I think any other neurodivergent person watching this will understand exactly what I mean. You know, kids are cruel, kids are weird, but being kind of the odd one out in a selection of kids all trying to like fit into something is really difficult. That made absolutely no sense, but I feel like it might have. Again, that also made no sense. Kat, let's move on. In year 4, a new girl joined our class, let's call her S, and I was so excited for her to join because I thought I'd finally have a friend, because I was told that she loves gymnastics and horse riding, and I was allocated as her like support buddy for her first few days. And, you know, when she first came in, we were all like, oh, okay, are you only coming for one lesson? Because that was really unusual. And it just, over the next few days, it like she never really came to class, and it was really odd. You know, you're a new kid joining, we've been told so much about you, so much like exciting stuff and whatnot, and obviously it came from a place that she needed extra support, but at that time, we're so young, we didn't really realise that, and we just kind of had this like subconscious grudge and like bias against her, and it was quite obvious that she had some struggles of her own, and I'm not going to tear her down for it. But very soon after she joined the school, a lot of like outbursts started happening, and a lot of them were targeted towards me. And I'm not going to make this too detailed here, firstly because I don't want it to be, you know, graphic, and also because I don't want to make this section too long because it could go on for hours, me talking about my primary school experiences with the girl called S. But needless to say, there were many occasions where I was left crying, shaking, terrified, having to get locked into an office and having the school on like entire shutdown. You know, I was genuinely fearing for my life on some occasions in primary school, you know, which is not fun. I actually developed like really severe anxiety, and I started experiencing this thing called air hunger, which is going to sound really weird. But I had to go to the GP so many times for this. I thought initially it was a tic. Basically, it's where you struggle to breathe due to anxiety, so you kind of do like this yawning motion. It's actually like a reaction from your body, like an anxiety reaction to, you know, not feeling like it has enough oxygen. But yeah, in year 4, we also had our first PGL experience, which for anybody not in the UK is basically, apparently it stands for like parents get lost or something. It's where kids in primary school like go on like a residential holiday for like 3 days just to do like some team building exercise and things like that. And I really did not want to go. This was literally only 2 nights and I was terrified. I had severe attachment issues, and luckily I've kind of moved past that now, but I only just managed to go on the year 4 PGL trip, and I cried myself to sleep every single night. The other day I literally found this paper aeroplane that my friends had written to me. I remember I was sleeping on the top bunk and they threw me a paper aeroplane that said, "You're gonna be okay, Kat, it's all gonna be okay." But we also had a PGL trip in year 6, which was a week long, and I would literally vomit of anxiety because I was so scared and I didn't end up going. I was like one of the 3 people who didn't go because I was so afraid, which is, you know, again sad because I missed out on quite like a key moment in a lot of people's childhoods. But it is what it is, my dudes, it is what it is. The last key thing I want to mention about primary school is my year 6 gymnastics avoidance. Now, this is going to sound, again, like, girl, you love gymnastics, what do you mean avoidance? Basically, the last session before the term ended, I had, like, a violent food poisoning, and it was, like, the first session of gymnastics that I had missed in, like, 6 years. Like, I was so dedicated to gymnastics that, like, I never missed a single session. But I missed this one session, and, my parents were like, oh, it's okay, you were sick, it doesn't matter, but I was panicking so much about this. So, like, for at least 6 to 8 months, I did not go to a single session of gymnastics because I was so afraid that I would show up and they'd be like, where were you? And that's like, obviously they're not going to say that because I literally have a very valid excuse that I was unwell, and they're not going to just like kick me out of the gym and be like, you naughty, naughty child. They're not going to do that. But my anxiety was telling me otherwise. So that was an error that I had to get over with some exposure therapy. We all do love exposure therapy. We don't, but it helps. So that's wonderful. Moving on to chapter 2, which I'm calling Secondary School and Its Tumultuous Experiences. Basically the end of year 6 and then the entirety of year 7 was like the height of COVID. And I actually really found the pandemic helpful to me because I didn't have to go to school. And obviously the pandemic was a horrible time, but from like my neurodivergent point of view, someone who really struggles with socializing, interacting, and I also have slow processing time, being able to do things at my own pace in my own space and not having to interact with people was brilliant for me, and I really thrived, and I actually did really, really well in the pandemic, which obviously is odd, but it is what it is, my dudes. I was put in top set for every single subject as soon as I joined year 7, which was a lot of pressure, but I felt very proud about it. I didn't have any homework when I was in primary school because that was their kind of like holistic approach and whatever. They believed in meditation and poetry solving all your problems, but clearly they caused the problems, so I'm not really sure what that was about, my dudes. Secondary school was kind of like my first exposure to homework, and especially being in top set, it was like hustle, hustle, hustle. You've got to be doing this the fastest because you're in top set. We expect the most of you. And like I realized I could not keep up with this workload, and I started feeling really out of control and really, really scared. And I would get so overwhelmed that I started having panic attacks. And around the same time, I'm like growing up, I'm a teenager, and I am starting to get really conscious about my body. And so needing something to control in my life, needing to feel better about myself in some way because I was just feeling so much pressure from every side of my life at that point, I developed an eating disorder. Whoa! Not woo, my dudes. That is not woo. That is not fun. That is not cool. That is not snazzy. I do not recommend. This kind of went on for like a good 8 months before it started getting so bad that I was completely not going to school and having such bad panic attacks. And my mum was like, okay, this girl has a problem. She called the doctor and I was referred to CAMS. To those of you who know, I'm so sorry. CAMS is basically the UK's like adolescent mental health service. Not that they do very much, they just kind of, stab you with a knife a billion times and like, yes, haha, that's gonna fix your problems. They don't really do much, I can't even lie. If you've had a good experience with CAMS, I'm so happy for you, but it was just not the case for me. They kind of hit me with the very basic, you need to eat more, darling. You're gonna feel so much better if you eat more. And they actually banned me from going to school. They banned me from going on holiday, and all the fun things in my life they took away from me. And it kind of made me like a really angry person at the time because I was adamant that I was not unwell in any way, shape or form, and that I just, needed a bit of therapy for what happened in primary school. But, they were like, no, unless you fix your physical situation, we're not going to help you with your mental situation, which is such a stupid way to do things because they go so hand in hand. So, that's another problem that I have with the CAMS and the mental health system in the UK. But yeah, it was a really tough time for me, like the year 8/9 era, because that's when I was like struggling and no one was really helping me. So I kind of just like suffered in silence. I had regular like weekly CAMS meetings which would last like hours long every single time, and I'd end up crying, sobbing, feeling worse about myself, and they did not help me whatsoever. I started struggling with self-harm as well, as I said, not going into anything graphic, but again, they didn't really do anything about that. They were not offering me any support. They were just kind of saying, you know what, we've done an appointment with her, take her off the list. If she's not gonna accept our help, that's her problem. And my family got so desperate for help that we went to a homeopath, which I called this lady the witch, because she was magical in some way, like not a witch in a bad way, like a witch in a great way. Like she was super cool. She does like homeopathic medicine, which is like natural remedies. She gave me some sort of like essential oil drops that are supposed to help with panic attacks, and I don't know if it was a placebo effect, but they genuinely did help at some points. I'm not recommending anything. I'm no medical expert, but that's just my experience. But she was the first person who genuinely listened to me, and it was really refreshing to kind of be listened to. But at the same time, I was still really struggling, and it came to a point where even the witch's magical drops didn't help me anymore. So we went to private therapy, and private therapy, it genuinely changed my life. Shout out to Laura if you're listening to this. I love you so much. You are an absolute queen. Basically, Laura helped me realize that yes, I do have a problem. And she treated me as a person and not a patient. She talked to me as though I was more than just another number, which was the opposite of CAMS. It's all about how much you weigh, what your blood counts are, what you are or aren't eating. And with Laura, I just felt safe because she specifically said to me, you know, she has no interest in my numbers. And so Laura was the one who helped me realize that I did have a problem. And she also introduced me to the idea of actor cat versus anorexia cat, which was kind of the idea that I am not the same person as my eating disorder and that I can be detached, you know, and that was really helpful to me, where I didn't really see myself as, you know, I'm the monster. It was like there's a monster that's consuming me, but I am not that monster. Whereas at CAMS, it was kind of like, you need to fix this, you need to fix that. It was never like, Kat, we're going to help you. It was more like, you need to do this and do that and do that. And there was never any psychological support. But Laura really understood that I needed a different approach in therapy. So we did a lot of art therapy, a lot of kind of creative things. And she was actually one of the first people who brought up the suggestion of doing an autism assessment, because she thought that I had a lot of traits, but I kind of brushed it aside. I thought it wasn't really like relevant at the time. And the professionals at CAMS were actually very insistent as well on asking, you know, do I have an autism diagnosis? And my mum was always like, no, not at all, because we were very uneducated on autism and the fact that being neurodivergent is a very large spectrum. But having no like accurate representation of autism in media at the time, it would have been very difficult for me, you know, as a young person to be like, oh yeah, that's me, that's definitely me. But at this point, quite a few people had inquired whether or not I might be autistic, but we just kind of brushed it aside because we thought it wasn't really like the most important matter. However, in hindsight, I think that having a diagnosis or like investigating into that pathway further would have really, really helped, because they can kind of understand, you know, they need a different approach with how they, you know, help me recover. They did absolutely nothing, but maybe they could have changed something in their approach and realized, you know, just giving me a generic meal plan is not going to help, and they need to be gentle. They need to understand that, you know, change is not very easy for me as a neurodivergent person, and kind of lean into supporting me instead of just throwing me into the deep end, because that is genuinely what the environment at CAMS felt like. It felt like I didn't know how to swim and they were throwing me into the ocean full of piranhas and they were just attacking me, and I didn't know what to do, so I would just freeze. And that is like the best analogy I could give of what it feels like to be with CAMS. But anyway, that was really long-winded. Let's move on. At this point, I was really, really, really kind of making progress in my acting. I was in a professional improv troupe, which is like improvisation. We did full-on shows, which were entirely improvised. It was my absolute passion. Sam Plum, mwah, my heart and soul. I love you so much, Samuel. Incredible. So acting was really keeping me going. So I made an Instagram account. Oh, look at me being fancy. And initially, I just wanted to, you know, post about my acting. But then it kind of dawned on me, you know, I love content creation. I love making little films. And this was something that I'd loved doing ever since I was little. I've still got like iMovie videos of me when I was like 7 doing like, oh my gosh, did you ever watch the Pink Windmill Kids? Because there's like the meme like, hi, my name's Katrina. And I remade that. That was iconic. Oh, but I loved the idea that I could, you know, use my love for filmmaking and kind of just like content creation and put that on social media and kind of share that with the world. So if you scroll right back on my Instagram page and also on YouTube, a lot of the things that I do are more like comedy based and things like that. I'm funny. I promise I'm funny on occasion. But social media was something that was really, really fun for me. And I was at that point not really, you know, documenting my recovery in any way, because when I first started social media, I was still like in the denial phase of my eating disorder. But later on, it was kind of more like, yeah, I need support, I need help. And that's when I really started, you know, actually fighting for recovery and fighting for my life back. And something that kind of gave me this motivation was my holiday in Locarno at the film festival. I've got vlogs on my YouTube channel about this, but it was me going into this environment of filmmakers and film lovers and seeing, you know, film premieres, meeting actors, you know, being in this beautiful place where they speak Italian, and I fell in love with the language, and also just realizing this is what I want to do with my life. But at the same time realizing, you know, Kat, you're not having as much fun and experiencing as many amazing things as you could be doing because of your eating disorder. You know, like I was sitting there, you know, counting the calories in the box of cereal, whereas my parents were eating pizza and enjoying their holiday as they should be. And I always just felt like I'm being the burden, which is a horrible way to feel, but it kind of made me realise, like, oh, Kat, you've got something to fight for, because before that, I was really, really struggling with, suicidal thoughts and things like that. And I'd also been given a scholarship to do the Young Actors Company summer school, where I met the incredible Robin Holdaway, and I had the time of my life. It was kind of the first time that I was really, like, having to be committed to something every single day, because it was for an entire week from 10 till 5. I was at the theatre, and it was so encouraging and so exhilarating, and it was my motivation to go back to school. And obviously it was really difficult. I would just do like one lesson a day when I got back to school, but it felt like I was getting my life back. But in reality, I was still really deeply struggling with my eating disorder, and nothing had really gotten better. In fact, a couple of weeks after starting school, I had a really bad health scare where we actually had to call 111, which is the UK's non-emergency number, because I was so scared that I was going to die. I promise that this is not me being dramatic. I have a video about it on my YouTube channel. Gosh, this episode is literally just me promoting my content. That is so fun for me. Guys, go stream Cat the Cucumber. What? I don't even have a song. Ooh, should I write some music? That'd be fun. Cat, focus. But yeah, I had a really bad health scare, and it was terrifying spending the night in hospital. And I kind of realised, I said to my mum, like, Mum, this would not have been so bad had it not been for my eating disorder. And that was kind of like, I'm going all in. And there is a post very far back on my Instagram page where I, for the first time, acknowledged that I've got an eating disorder and I need to recover. I actually, for a few weeks after that health scare, was doing really well. I was making progress in my recovery, but eventually I slipped back into old patterns, and before you knew it, things were getting worse and worse and worse. At Christmas time, I remember bawling my eyes out after, cooking food for everybody else in my family and not eating any of it because my eating disorder was telling me that I couldn't. And I remember sitting in my room and searching up inpatient units because I was like, I need help. I want my life. Like, I was so desperate at this point for some sort of support. I was like screaming to the heavens for help. And so we were referred to the home treatment team, which is a tier 4 support system in like the UK mental health system. There's like 4 different tiers. Tier 4 is like the equivalent to an inpatient unit. So either, you go to the home treatment team or you go into an inpatient unit. I ended up doing both, as you will later find out. It was kind of like the first sign of hope. We had to beg to get referred to the home treatment team. CAMs were really not wanting to help because, they were not doing much, my dudes. Even though they sent us many threatening letters that were like, we're gonna have to section your child if she does not comply with these treatment protocols. And we're like, we're begging for help. You can't be threatening us when we're begging you for help. The home treatment team was so, so helpful. Stephen, who was the first person who ever visited me from HTT, love you, Stephen. You're amazing. You're super slay. And one day you're going to be a guest on my podcast, which is going to be super cool. Thank you for everything, Stephen. You genuinely saved my life. But I ended up having to go into hospital, like a just general gastro ward, where I was on NG feeds, which was not my best moment in life, can't even lie. But I, 2 weeks later, got a bed in an inpatient unit, and I spent 4 months of my life there. It was not the funnest place, I've got to be honest. I had a lot of trauma there. I don't want to go into too many details, but if you do want a full deep dive into my time in the inpatient unit, let me know and I will make an entire episode on my time inpatient. But yeah, we're going to go and just brush through this inpatient chapter. I forgot to do chapters. I was like, I'm going to be so organised and do chapters. Chapter 7, inpatient unit. But yeah, that happened, and when I was discharged, I really found like life again. I found like a joy to being alive, which it just makes me happy to think about it. I was definitely discharged too early. The doctors were like, yeah, we don't want to discharge you. I don't think you're ready. But like, I had this holiday. We were going to go to Locarno again. It was kind of like my big reward. So we like begged them to discharge me, and they were like, okay, fine, if you keep doing this and if you keep like checking in with us. So they discharged me, and I was like, yes. And we literally fled the country the next day. But I could definitely tell that I was discharged too early because, I had the pizzas in Locarno, but I still had that like mentality of, the restriction and kind of the sticking to this meal plan. But eventually, as I kind of settled back into life, I found normality again, and I found the joy in social eating, and yeah, it was really great. I did go through a phase of binge eating, which is very different from extreme hunger because I experienced both. So if you want an episode on that, again, let me know. But I'm kind of just going to go over that because this has been so long already. But yeah, life after inpatient was so much better. I very much recommend recovering from your eating disorders, my dudes. But I will say that, life is not entirely sunshine and rainbows because I did have attempts to take my own life on 3 different occasions. Thankfully, it didn't work because I'm here now and I can make stupid podcast episodes to entertain you all. Yeah, I am not doing as many GCSEs as I would have liked to do, and I do still have days where I really, really struggle mentally, but I am more than 100 days clean from self-harm. I am eating regular meals every single day. I went out for ice cream with my therapist today without a second thought, and that's just so, it just makes me so happy to think about that. You know, I've come a long way. But yeah, that is my mental health journey. I'm going to move on to cucumber questions because that's been a very long-winded talk. Today's cucumber question is from Bethany.Mitchell75 over on Instagram, and they have asked, what is your dream job? Acting, of course. Acting, directing, something in the filmmaking or just like creative performing arts industry has always been my passion. If you want an entire episode on my love for acting, let me know. Kat, stop doing self-promo. Okay, let's move on from that because otherwise I will just rant about theatre for the rest of this episode. I'm going to do one last question from someone_15, also over on Instagram, and they have asked, how does one be as cool as you? Well, my dude, my simple answer to this would be to join the alien gang, and then you are automatically as cool as me. But no, I'm honestly flattered by this. Yeah, just come join the alien gang. I'm kind of panicking here, I don't know how to answer this question. Positivity, that's our next section. I have a quote here from Soph Loves Soccer, which is, it is never too late to be what you might have been, which I love that. I think that's such a fitting quote for today's episode as well. You know, you can always be that person that you always dreamed of being, no matter what you're currently going through or no matter what you've been through. Your trauma does not define you. Your experiences do not define you. It is what you choose to do with your life in the present moment. That was really deep for no reason. Oh my gosh, I need to share this. BC_Lydia has said that they managed to stay an entire night away from home/family for the first time in over a year. That is massive. I'm so proud of you, my dude. That is amazing. Keep sharing your wins with me. Casey_crochets made it to the age of 14. I'm so proud of you, my dude. I'm so proud of you. I literally, whenever I read your wins, I like start glowing. I'm like, my babies, you're doing so well. I love you guys so much. Please keep sharing your wins. If you want to submit anything for this podcast, whether it's a topic request, whether it's a cucumber question, or if it's some positivity, which can be a quote, a recovery win, or just a good moment in your life, you can email me at catthecucumberofficial@gmail.com. I'm going to finish today's episode with an alien update, which is that I feel like life is kind of coming full circle. I just got cast as Puck in A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is like one of my absolute dream roles. And before I went inpatient, actually my main reason not to go inpatient was the fact that I had gotten cast in A Midsummer Night's Dream and I really wanted to perform in A Midsummer Night's Dream because it's my favourite play of all time, and I ended up not being able to do it. But now it's like a year later, literally, and I'm now doing what I dreamed of doing back then, and I'll be able to put so much more effort into it because I'm physically stronger, mentally happier and healthier, and it just feels like life is coming full circle. But yeah, another unfortunate update is the fact that I've got exams, which are not fun, and to anyone else going through exams at the moment, you've got this, my dudes. I know just how tough it can be, but I'm so proud of you. You're going to do so well, and you know, as I was mentioning before, your worth is not dependent on numbers. So whether you pass, whether you fail, whether you get the best grade of your life, I'm proud of you. I love you so much. That's it for today, my dudes. Thank you so much for floating through this episode with me. If no one's told you today, I love you so much. I'm proud of you. You are doing amazing. And I will see you in 2 weeks' time, my dudes. Thank you so much for all the support on the previous podcast episode. I love you all so much. Toodles! This episode was dedicated to my therapist, Kelly, who had the audacity to leave me for another job. I love you so much, Queen, but how dare you?